Vataharo isha, vatele ben, vatera osa kitovu, vatitzpenehu shalosha yerochim. In this week's Parshat Shemot, we find the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yocheved gives birth to Moshe. Vataro isha vatele ben, vatera osa kitovu, and she saw that he was beautiful. The Pasuk tells us that his mother saw the newborn baby was beautiful. Asks the Ramban, why do we need to be told that? All mothers find their babies beautiful, whether they're beautiful or whether they're ugly. That's the natural state of affairs. He doesn't mention oxytocin, but that's what he's talking about. Clearly, the connection between a mother and the newborn baby makes her feel that this newborn baby is tov, is beautiful, is wonderful. Why is the Torah here telling us uniquely, out of all the births recorded in the Tanakh, Vatera osa ki tovu? Says Rashi, shenismale kol habayis kula oro. At his birth, the room, the house, was filled with light. What sort of light came into being when Moshe Rabbeinu is born? Chazal tell us in Sota Daf Yud Beis that make a connection on this word ki tov. The first time we find the word ki tov is Vayar Elokim es ha'or ki tov. At the very beginning of creation, in Bereshis chapter 1, the very first thing that is created is light, and that light is called ha'or ki tov. And it's that connection with this phrase ki tov at the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu to the connection of light, which Rashi is talking about. However, on closer examination, we can see that actually this light is not an ordinary light. It didn't mean that she could save electricity. It meant that the light that came out of this newborn child was something quite unique. And indeed, if you look at Chazal explaining to us the light of the first day of creation, they say that this light is not the light of physics. The light of the world, the light that we live by, is the light of the sun. And that was only created on day 4. So what was the light that was created on day 1? Says Rashi, this was the light of Olam Haba. This is the light of pure Ruchnius. The Zohar says that light of pure Ruchnius was hidden within the Torah, and the Torah is able to generate that light later on. And indeed, when Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of Kisisa comes down with a second set of luchos, the Pasuk tells us that Koran Or Ponov, he radiated light to such a degree that no one could look at him. He had to put a masveh, to put a veil over himself in order that people could be in his presence at all. So that light, which came to its full fruition many years later after Matan Torah, that light was already present in potential at his birth. That was the light. And indeed the Kliyoko adds, why does the Pasuk say, Vatitzpenehu shalosha yerochim? Why is it, what's the connection between that and the fact that Yocheved hid Moshe Rabbeinu for 3 months? Is because the light was the Or HaTzofun. That's where the word Tzofun comes from, the hidden light. That light actually did not remain, the light of the first day did not remain Ba'olam Hazeh. This is the light of Olam Haba. It's the light of inspiration. It's the light of Emunah. It's the light of living totally in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. That was the light that was already evident. Vatera osa ki tovu. That was something that Yocheved noticed, and it's quite possible that when Batia opens the cradle on the River Nile and sees the child, she also sees that light. That's what she sees. She sees something different about this child. Right? She sees that this child has got a special quality, and that indeed is Moshe Rabbeinu, who comes into this world and changes really the future of Klal Yisrael. What's interesting is that, of course, in Parshat Shemot we also find not only the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, but the appointment of Moshe Rabbeinu. Here he is already 80 years later. We don't know too much about him. The Torah fast forwards from his birth to his appointment 80 years later. At the burning bush, he's appointed to be, Kadosh Baruch Hu tells him he's destined to be the leader of Klal Yisrael. But Moshe Rabbeinu understands that there are 2 different jobs here. He says, Mi onochi ke'elech al Paro, who am I to go to Pharaoh? Says Rashi, the only way to get Paro to send the Jewish people out is either to convince him, and lo ish devorim or nochi, I'm not able to convince anybody of anything. I'm not a speaker, I'm not a man of words. And not only that, the other way to convince him is by forcing his hands. There's no way, ba'olam hateva, There's no way naturally that we, the subjugated, enslaved people of Israel, are going to be able to force him and fight against him to let us go. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, here's the key. The key is Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will be with you, and what's going to happen is something beyond nature. And Yetzias Mitzrayim becomes the supernatural birth of Klal Yisrael. So we have in Parshat Shemot first the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, which brings with it a certain light, which clearly is a little bit supernatural. And Moshe Rabbeinu is told, Eyeh Asher Eyeh, the power, the supernatural power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to manifest itself in Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's how it's going to work. There's something beautiful about this name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which appears uniquely only once in this week's Parsha. Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. Difficult to translate. But what's interesting is that it's the Shem Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei which speaks about existence itself, the source of all existence, but it's in the future. It refers to the future. And Shamshon Raphael Hirsch already explains that whereas the name Elokim refers in a sense to the past, it refers to creation, it refers to the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in the very beginning and remains in that creation from the beginning. Eheyeh is about the future spiritual unfolding of the world leading towards its ultimate redemption. In other words, Eheyeh is that spiritual element within the world which can grow and develop and which can inspire human beings to a better life. What's interesting, the Meshech Chochmah brings us a very beautiful gematria. Even those people who are not particularly happy or with gematrias must appreciate this amazing gematria of the Meshech Chochmah here, that he says Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh gives us a very interesting other connection, because the gematria of the word Eheyeh is 21, and it's mentioned twice. And this, he says, is the connection of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yetzias Mitzrayim, and a very curious fact, that in next week's Parsha, at Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Jewish people are not only given the laws of Pesach and Korban Pesach, they're given the mitzvah of Tefillin. Twice they're given it, right? Two Parshas, the last two Parshas of Parshas Boi are given us for the first time. Is mentioned twice, and not only is it mentioned there, but these Parshas are actually written in the Tefillin. Says the Meshech Chochmah, Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. The 21 gematria of Eheyeh is a reference to the fact, and the Rambam mentions this in Hilchos Tefillin, when he speaks about the extraordinary Kedusha of Tefillin. He says, in the Tefillin there are 21 references to the name of God. The Shem Hashem is mentioned 21 times in the Shel Rosh, and 21 times in the Shel Yad. And therefore, says the Rambam, the Kedusha of Tefillin is even greater than the tzitz, which was worn by the Kohen Gadol on his forehead, which only contained the Shem Hashem once. So the Tefillin are many times greater than the Kedusha of the tzitz, but this 21 on the hand and on the head is the Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. One is the Shel Yad, and one is the Shel Rosh. And this becomes the secret weapon, so to speak, of Klal Yisrael. One is public and one is private. The Shel Yad is meant to be the private power of Klal Yisrael to overcome all their own negativity and overcome the Yetzer Hara. Ezehu Gibor HaKovesh Yisro, the Gevura of Klal Yisrael, is the hidden strength of Klal Yisrael. And then there is the Tefillin Shel Rosh, which is the Gemara in Menachos connects it to the pasuk in the Devarim, which says, "V'ro'u kol amei ha'oretz ki Shem Hashem nikra olecha." That even the Goyim eventually will see the Shem Hashem, which is connected to us, and that's connected, says the Gemara, to the Tefillin Shel Rosh. So you have these two mitzvahs, the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, each containing 21 Shem Hashem, which is the Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. And in actual fact, the Kabbalim say that in the Birchos HaShachar, it's very interesting. When we make brachos in the morning, we first thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all our natural functions. Pokeach Ivrim, Zokev Kefufim, Malbish Arumim, Matir Asurim. This is all something, gifts which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to every human being in the world, and we are expressing our gratefulness to it. But there are two brachos which mention the word Yisrael, which are unique to Klal Yisrael. And they are Ozer Yisrael B'Gevura and Oter Yisrael B'Sifara. Say the Mukubalim, the Pritzadik brings this down, others, Sfas Emes bring this down, that Oza Yisrael B'Gevura is the Tefillin Shel Yad. That is the Gevura, the hidden Kovesh as Yitzro ability of Klal Yisrael, and that's only Yisrael, Oza Yisrael B'Gevura. And then Ota Yisrael B'Sifara, that is the crown of Tiferes. Tiferes is the Yad Hashem, which acted in Yetzias Mitzrayim and reacted throughout history to save Klal Yisrael, to protect Klal Yisrael, and guide us towards a better future. So you have already in Sefer Shemos, in Parshat Shemos, you have the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, the light of the Yom Rishon, the light, the Or HaTzofon, which shines from this individual, which translates itself first into the Tefillin. I remember my father, Zichron Livracha, when he said his Birkas HaShachar, when he said Oza Yisrael B'Gevura, he would put his hand on his Shel Yad and kiss it, and Ota Yisrael B'Sifara on his Shel Rosh, and he would kiss his Shel Rosh. Clearly that is the symbolic connection between these brachas. They have other meanings as well, but this meaning is particularly significant and particularly connected to this week's Parsha Ehyeh She'ehyeh. The Meshech continues that, of course, the 21 plus 21 equals 42. And that is the ultimate name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu mentioned in the Gemara in Kiddushin, Ayin Aleph, where the Gemara there says that the ultimate Shem Hashem has got 42 letters. We've got no concept of the 42 letters of the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The closest we get to it is the famous mystical Kabbalistic tefillah of Ono B'Koyach Gedulas Yemincha, which is a tefillah of unknown origin, which contains 7 lines of 6 words each. Altogether 42 words. And these 42 words, each one is meant to represent one letter of the Shem Hashem. And once one has completed Ana B'Koyach Gedulas Yemincha, we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Void, because we've just said in some hidden way the Shem Hashem. In fact, I once picked up a book called Ner Yisrael, which is a particularly beautiful name for me and my connections to the Kehillah that I had in London. And Ner Yisrael is a sefer written by the Kozhnitzer Maggid, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, where the entire sefer is a perush to Ono B'Koyach Gedulas Yemincha, explaining every single word in that tefillah Kabbalistically. Honestly, I must tell you that I couldn't understand what he was saying because it was written in Kabbalistic vocabulary, which is its own private language, which is only accessible to people who are extremely learned in that field. But I'll call upon him. We have here in Parshat Shemos the beginnings of the extra powerful Ruchnius, which is supernatural powers that Klal Yisrael have, which is symbolized by the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. That light from the very beginning was already evident, but it came to its fruition after Matan Torah. And the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is tied on our hands and our heads daily, the Shem Hashem Nikra Olecha, that gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, and that is really the power of Klal Yisrael going forward to bring down the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into this world. V'chein yehi rotz.